wanted to take away from Chas v'Shalom, from the grand Farbringen, as they call it, from the Kinus HaShluchim. So we'll just, and I believe that most people will be watching the Kinus, the Farbringens of the Kinus. Chedesh, known as Chedesh Shagula in the Lubavitch, and other Yom Tovim, other Yom Progress in the month of Kislev. So you have Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and you have Tes Kislev, and Yud Kislev, and Yudalet Kislev, and Yutes Kislev, Chav Kislev, and at the end you have Chanukah, which is also connected with light, with Eir and Eir Achsidus, Eir HaTorah. So we should have a good month. We should use it the proper way. L'chaim, l'chaim. Like I said before, I'm going to repeat it again, that really tonight there is the Farbringen of the Kinus HaShluchim, and a lot of people are connecting themselves to that Farbringen, which is the right thing to do. We even had a suffix whether to make this or not because of the Kinus HaShluchim Farbringen, but then there are some people who are not part of that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the tomorrow's banquet, I think, is open to the public. I'm not sure. I have to find out. I think that's what I heard. But tonight, and this Farbringen that they're making a global, starting from Australia and going through all the countries, so that is only for Shluchim. So I thought we should have a Farbringen, just Shabbos Mevorchim, and also mainly because it's right before Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and Rosh Chodesh Kislev is something that we all have a connection to very closely. And of all the Yom Progress of the month of Kislev, it would seem that Rosh Chodesh Kislev is the one that is closest to the heart. Because that's the closest to us, not only because of the Rebbe, while the other things are the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, but the Dalet Kislev is also the Rebbe, and it's also a Inyan Ikri, because that's the day the Rebbe said that that's the day that connected him to us and us to him. It was the day of the Rebbe's Chasana, which in the Alabatish technical way, the connection of the Rebbe becoming Rebbe is because he married the Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter. Like we know Be'etzem, the Rebbe is from Sheshes Mebresh destined to be the Rebbe. Still, they had to go through a Gashmas Dike channel, and that was the Gashmas channel, so the Dalet Kislev is the day that made it. But still, it's a Chasana that took place in Tov Reish Peites in 1928, in the 1928. But Rosh Chodesh Kislev is something closer to us because it's something that many of us actually experienced. And we experienced both parts of it. We experienced the part of what happened on Shmini Atzeres that year, Tovshin Lamed Ches, when the Rebbe suffered a heart attack in the middle of Akofes, and throughout the whole time. And then the Chodesh Kislev, when we celebrate the Rebbe's recovery. So that's something that's closer to us. So out of all the progress of the month of Kislev that we're now talking about, because it's Shabbos Mevorchim, which is the Shabbos Mevorchim of the whole month. So the closest to us is Rosh Chodesh. Besides, like I said before, Sof Rosh Chodesh is in 2 days, in 3 days, while other days is the middle of the month. So that's the first thing that we think about. And also, I doubt there'll be another Farbringen on Zoom or Rosh Chodesh Kislev specifically. So this could be the one that's connected to Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So this is one of the things that to talk about, even though we know, and I see this every year, that who decided that Rosh Chodesh Kislev is the day that's going to be to celebrate the Rebbe's recovery. It wasn't from the Rebbe. As a matter of fact, it seemed like that year from the Rebbe that he was planning to set aside Zeis Chanukah as the day. Because the first Zeis Chanukah, the Rebbe had the Farbringen in the middle of the day. Excuse me. So the Rebbe had a special sudden Farbringen, surprise Farbringen, that he asked Rabbi Hecht.
You want me to sit down with you and watch it? Huh? Want me to sit down next to you and watch it? Is it interesting?
Could you, someone,
then you can see.
mute yourself? So the Rebbe celebrated, so to speak, it was Seis Chanukah, because that year the Rebbe called in Rabbi Yankel Hecht and asked him if he could keep a secret. And he told him that he should prepare challah and wine for a farbrengen that the Rebbe is going to have on Seis Chanukah. He made sure that he shouldn't tell anybody, it's going to be a surprise. And there was a farbrengen. Actually, it's interesting, some small side things that was known then, that the Rebbe, he asked the Rebbe, can he tell his children or something? So the Rebbe said, if you tell a bocher, then the whole world will know about it. Then he asked the Rebbe, can he tell his brother, Avrom? So the Rebbe said, no. The Pele told his brother, and Avrom came that day, middle of the day of 770. He sees the Maskiros and he says, they asked him, what are you doing here? He says, I came to farbrengen. What kind of farbrengen? They didn't know. But then right away there was a thing, so there was a farbrengen. And later when Yankel Hecht went in and the Rebbe thanked him and he told the Rebbe, that's what the words he used, that my brother spilled the beans. And he was the one that told that there'll be. But anyway, the Rebbe spoke about it, and the Rebbe gave kosher bracha, and it seemed like the kosher bracha that the Rebbe gave Zeis Chanukah was to make up that he missed kosher bracha and Simchas Torah. Even though he sent down kosher bracha, I remember with Rabbi Chadikov to give to people, but the Rebbe himself didn't. And we knew then that the Rebbe, if he missed kosher bracha, it's a came on the shus, so he'll always feel that he's still obligated to give. So he made kosher bracha and he gave him whatever. So it seemed like from the Rebbe, it looked like that he was going to make this into the day of the Suda Seidoah for his recovery. The Peil Chassidim decided that it was Rosh Kislev, not knowing against Rebbe Chas v'Shalom, but just very Harlik. They made it because that's the day that the Rebbe left 770. Now the Rebbe didn't really recover from the heart attack. It's possible that in theory he never recovered. That's why he never benched Gemel. And the din by Gemel is that you only bench Gemel if Yachzer Laburi Legamre, when you recover completely. And they say from a heart attack, that's what some poskim hold, you don't bench because you never recover completely because there's a certain part of the heart that's never going to recover. You could function normally and everything go normal, but you still didn't recover. Well, I don't know if that's the reason. But Lepel never benched Gemel. But what happened on Ashkedesh Kislev was the Rebbe went home, which means in simple words that when the Rebbe had the heart attack, they turned the Rebbe's room into an intensive care unit. Mamish had all the machinery and that was Mamish like an intensive care. So they made that room into a hospital. Basically, it was like a hospital room. And the Ashkedesh Kislev, the Rebbe went home, which means the Rebbe left the hospital. It was the first time he went home after Simchas Torah. So the Rebbe left the hospital. So that's a milestone. That's a tkufa in a person's recovery, that when you leave the hospital, but after you leave the hospital, you still have to recover, and you still have to go through maybe certain therapies, and you have to rest up, and it's not the full recovery. But Lapel, that's something that the people saw. It's poshet physical with their eyes. All the other steps was not so poshet. This they saw. Natake, like I said, it wasn't a real recovery because you see the Kislev, there was a farbrengen like this. All the farbrengens was Motzei Shabbos later on. The first time, the first weeks, months, the Rebbe spoke from his room. Bechlal didn't come down. The Kislev, he came down to farbreng, but the doctors were very worried. He had a monitor on, and the doctors were monitoring, and they saw it wasn't the heartbeat wasn't going good. I think they even sent the Rebbe settled in the farbrengen that he should shorten the farbrengen, but the Rebbe didn't. Only thing by the Maimed, that's where I heard this from Dr. Resnick himself. He said by the Maimed, it was very normal. Sichas, the Rebbe, you could see the jump. I don't know exactly what it is. Doctors know the monitor was jumping up and down. It wasn't normal. But by the Maimed, everything was normal. See, people said that it was like he's sleeping. No, but he told me it's not he's sleeping, but it was normal. But it was still not over, and the Rebbe still had it wasn't so posh. But Rosh Chodesh Kislev, nevertheless, was the day that was announced as a date for Suda Seidoah, and the Rebbe accepted it. By and the Rebbe accepted it. So that became the day of the Yontif, and even though it's hard to say that Chassidim decided when the yontiv about the Rebbe should be. That's a strange thing because the yontiv, the packet of yontiv that's set aside is because Lamaila, they decided that this is going to be a yontiv. That's an interesting thing. It says, Kimu b'kibla by Purim, it says Kibulu lamata mashin Kimu lamata mashikibu lamaila. That lamata, they did it because lamaila, they decided this is going to be a yontiv. When it says Mordechai Yoda Eskova Shanase, it says Baruch HaKadosh, Mordechai knew. So you have to know what's a yontiv. In Chassidus, what does it say yontiv? Why is this certain day, a special day, yontiv? And some Yom Tovim are also b'melacha. It says because on the Shabbos and the yontiv, there's a different and an additional Gilui Elokus in the world. That's why it's a special day. Now it depends on the dargah. Shabbos is the most, so that's why Shabbos is also in everything. Yontiv is also, but not 100% in everything, so that's why certain malachas are mutter. Then there are Yom Tovim which are mutter b'melacha, but it's still a yontiv because there are certain hamshachas that happen, certain Gilui Elokus that comes into the world. So the concept of a yontiv is when there is a Gilui Elokus in the world. So Chassidim to decide that this is a yontiv is interesting. How would they decide? Ober as there's the expression that it says that Chassidim ho machush sutrefen sumemes. Chassidim have a chush to get to the truth, figure out the truth. Actually, there's a tshuva from the Ragachova, which I saw once. She writes to somebody who, in the tshuva, he calls him, you're a misnagid. He wasn't a misnagid, but he refers to him. And he talks about whether you should say Hallel Pesach night. I don't mean by the Seder. We, Chassidim, say Hallel after the end of Ma'ariv. For Aleinu, you say Hallel with a bracha. And others, Ashkenaz, Misnagdim, don't say Hallel. So like Tshuva has a tshuva to somebody, and there he brings a Yerushalmi, that from Yerushalmi you should see that you should say Hallel. And he writes to him, and the Mele, what the Chassidim do is right. And he says, even though, I don't remember the Lashon there exactly, something along these lines, even though I don't know if the Chassidim actually do this because they know the Yerushalmi. Of the Chassidim have a chush to get to the truth. Then he writes to him, what should I write to you or say to you? Misnagid shekameischo, misnagid like you. So what can I tell you? Actually, in that same tshuva, he writes to him, he's asking, like a tshuva is asking that row for a bracha. I don't feel so good. So as much as he referred to him like a little bit of zilzalik away, he asked him for a bracha. That means he gave him the proper covet. But anyway, so Chassidim have a chush sutra from Tzememe. So if Shchedish Kislev was, and we see later from the years, all the years that the Rebbe like accepted it, and then Shchedish Kislev that came that day. So the Shchedish Kislev is the day that we celebrate the Rebbe's recovery. Now, one might ask that Mele till Gimel Tammuz, the recovery meant the Rebbe is with us. But after Gimel Tammuz, I mean, I'm not asking about the kasha because it's a stupid kasha. But they just want to say that these things, that day that's special is always special. That time it was B'Peil Mamish Negeya, but it's the union is always there. We know that the Rambam established a day for something, a nes that happened to him. And the nes that happened to him, and later, all the years later, we used to celebrate that day. We have the Teisves Yontev, Shpoler Zayde. Shpoler Zayde said that there was a day that he was saved from drowning, and he said that all of Zainaklach should always celebrate that day. So the fact that we had the day that the Rebbe recovered, and we had the Rebbe back for so many years, the Gashmias, the Ruchnias is no problem. Ruchnias is Rebbe is there, and it's no shilas, but the Gashmias. So that is the Shchedish Kislev, and we always celebrate it. So now we celebrate the Shchedish Kislev. All the hamshachas that have to happen in connection to something like this is going on. Now, Chassidim always talk on the Shchedish Kislev, the Maila of the Shchedish Kislev, the greatness. And one of the Nekudas is always said is because it's similar to what the Rebbe explains. Remember when the Rebbe said the Sikha, but it's in the Sikhas, the Maila of Gimel Tammuz, which is the Geula of the Frierdiker Rebbe from jail, and he was sent to Kostroma, Lagaba Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. Now we celebrate the Chaga Geula Yud Beis Tammuz. Beis Yud Gimel Yud Beis. He got the surah that he's going out of exiled. In Gimel, he actually went out. And what happened? Gimel Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz, he was freed from jail. And he was sent to Kostrama. So Gimel Tammuz is also a special day, but it wasn't celebrated so much. At least the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he made the day into a Yontiv, he made Yud Beis Tammuz. For the first Yud Beis Tammuz, the year after he was in jail, he wrote a whole letter that this is a special day. Not only me Hashem took out, but every Yid had a Geula. Oh, the whole famous letter. It's all Yud Beis in Gimel Tammuz. It's not for Gimel Tammuz. And the Rebbe asked, why? So the Rebbe said like this: to us, be'emes, Gimel Tammuz should be more important than Yud Beis Tammuz. Why? Because Gimel Tammuz has to do with the Rebbe personally. He was in jail, and there was a death sentence, and they should save him. That's what Gimel Tammuz represents. After that, there was no more death sentence. Then he went to Kostrama. So for us, the Rebbe Be'etz and the Rebbe personally, the Rebbe himself, as a Yochid, that's what the Rebbe is, that's Negei to us. The Rebbe's Metzias. So why didn't the Frierdiker Rebbe make that into the Yontif? He says because mitzad the Rebbe's perspective, as long as he wasn't able to continue his work, Nafotzas Hayadus and spreading Chassidus and all his Aveda to bring a Lakus into the world, to him that's not really enough. Therefore, till Yud Beis Tammuz, even though he was out of jail and the death sentence was taken off, but he was limited. He went to Kostrama, he couldn't do his work, and therefore the Rebbe felt that this is still not enough. When it came Yud Beis Tammuz, that's when he decided. He said, now he's able to continue his work. And Taka, that's what happened. Continued out. So, but Mitzat Chassidim, the Rebbe said, Gimel Tammuz is to a certain degree more than Yud Beis Tammuz. So the same thing here, when we talk about the Shchedish Kislev, that's the day that has to do Poshet with the Rebbe's Gesund. The Rebbe Poshet, his physical health was in danger, and it was very, very much life-threatening. Mamish life-threatening. I don't know how many people are on the people of Bechlal were there then. We're going back. This is Tov Shin Lamed Ches. It's 42 years ago, 43 years ago, actually. So many of the young people heard about it, but weren't there. Don't remember what it was, but we remember the time, what we felt that time at night, and not only then, and the days after that, and till things, but then you went to Shchedish Kislev, but we all remember how it was. There was really, really very life-threatening situation. The doctor said that there are different levels of heart attacks, and the heart attack that Rebbe had was the worst level. So, and the Shchedish Kislev represents the recovery of the Rebbe, so that to us is something very, very special. Now, just to mention, those that remember or those that heard, I'm sure everybody knows the history, knows everything that happened, but it's Kedai just to go through a little bit of reminding ourselves what took place then in the Shmini Atzeres. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people remember that, but it just, in the kids and Nimrod, it was, I remember, if I could start from my perspective, I remember standing before the Rebbe came into our office. I was standing right next to the Rebbe's bima. I had my place there those years, right by the bima up front where the Rebbe stood at the bima throughout the whole Hakofes. So I missed out to see very clearly the Hakofes itself on the Rebbe's Hakofes. You couldn't have both. You couldn't have a good place, the whole Hakofes close to the Rebbe, and then be close at the time of when the Rebbe took the Hakofes, or you had a good place here, good place here. So I had a place right next to the Rebbe. Salderech, like it says in Mishnah, but the Kohen Gadol would do a lot of things on Yom Kippur. People would go and watch. So it says anybody who saw the Kohen Gadol read the Torah could not see the Kohen Gadol. What was the second tefillah? Couldn't see. And the Mishnah says, "Leit mipnei she'ein rashoyi." Not because you weren't allowed to see both, just physically you couldn't. If you had a good place to see here, you couldn't have a good place to see there. Anyway, so I remember standing there right before Hakofes, and I'm standing next to Rabbi Yoel. We both had a place together right in front of, in front of the beam by the Rebbe. And before the Rebbe came in, I remember Reb Shmuel Chefer, Olav Hasholem, who was in the Mishpacha. He was Rashag's nephew. So so it was about a shag, and he used to go into the Rebbetzin, I think. So he comes over to us, and he says, I have to tell you, you all have to be very careful tonight. And the words he used is because it's sakonis nefashis. You know what he was talking about. What's sakonis nefashis? I'm telling you, I know from inside, tonight is sakonis nefashis. And then, Take, we saw Take by the Hakofer that I remember standing there and I looked and the Rebbe was looking towards the Elam, and you could see on the spot in a second, Rebbe's face turned white, almost white like a sheet. You could see Amish, and Rabbi Groner was standing right next to it. And since I was standing in the front, I pulled Rabbi Groner by his bottom of his capote, and I said to him, it was pretty loud, I said, I think you have to give the Rebbe the chair. And as I said it, the Rebbe turned around and pointed to the chair. He wanted the chair, which the Rebbe should ask to give him the chair. That's when everyone saw what happened. The Rebbe sat down and became a whole tumult. And I think the first doctor that ran over, I think, was Dr. Winch from Miami. And he checked the Rebbe's pulse, and he saw what was going on. Right away, they started saying that they should close, everyone should go out. So there's a few thousand people there, but some stayed, very few. I mean, a little bit stayed, 100 to I don't know, a few, but everyone went out. It's a mess how within minutes the whole Zal became kemat empty. Somehow the windows were broken, so more fresh air to come out. Remember, somebody passed down from the other end of the shul where they had the sink, and there was a quart there that people used to use to wash. So some was sent up with some water to give the Rebbe to drink. So I remember, this was when I was still standing there, they gave the Rebbe the quart, and the Rebbe shook his head, he didn't want. Now I see when they write the Zechreinos from there, they say the Rebbe said he's not going to drink because it's before Kiddush. It's not true. He said nothing. The Rebbe didn't say anything. He just didn't take it, said he's not taking it. Didn't say, he just not. And I think, rather, it's not before Kiddush, and it wasn't in the Sukkah. I think there's another reason also. I think it was very dangerous to drink from that quart. That quart that was used by 5,000 people wasn't the most cleanest quart and the most healthiest quart to drink from. But anyway, then Hakofis finished. Most people went out, and Hakofis finished very fast. And Rebbe there was a few more Hakofis left, and the Rebbe went to Rashag, and Rashag made it very short. So the Rebbe was, I didn't see that, but the Rebbe said the Rebbe was ready to continue even more. And then they finished right away, and the Rebbe went upstairs. And the doctor said then that at a heart attack like that, I can't imagine, the pain is so great, how he even walked up the steps. He walked up the steps, he walked into his room and slammed the door, didn't let anyone come in. But they noticed, B'shas the Rebbe slammed the door, they noticed that he fell back on the wall. In other words, till then he was holding him so back, and then he fell. And the people knocked on Chadakov, this knocked on the door, he wouldn't open. Till Chana, Rashag's wife, came and knocked on the door, and the Rebbe opened to her. Then the whole thing started. The doctors came, and everyone knows this, and they wanted him to go to the hospital. He didn't want to go to the hospital. But you can imagine the feeling that Chassidim had. They knew that the Rebbe's life is in danger. And then, after the Rebbe went in his room, the Rebbetzin came. So I remember the Rebbe went out to the sukkah to make Kiddush. So we were standing outside, and I saw the Rebbe come out. So the Rebbetzin came into the sukkah. We heard later that they asked the Rebbe to make Kiddush and grape juice, and the Rebbe said, Kiddush macht man a wine. He also said that, again, who knows if it's true, but that's what they said. Who said this? I think maybe Dr. Elixon said, I don't remember, that they asked the Rebbe to drink some juice, orange juice, and I think he said, for 40 years already they didn't drink orange juice. That's what he said. But the Rebbe, orange juice was a symbol of the American style, of American balabatishkeit, I don't know. Then the Rebbe went out of the sukkah. He went out, and people were singing, and the Rebbe made with his hand like this, walking out, back to his room. So people calmed down. So many people went home because they went back already. And the doctor said that night, in the middle of the night, he had a second heart attack, even a stronger one, a worse one. Then it started in the morning when people came, everyone heard what's happening. People walked to the aisle. I remember I was davening in the minyan with Rabbi Reichik, actually, in the conference room of in the building of Merkaz. So there was a minyan there. Rabbi Reichik was there. Who else was there? Not too many people. Rabbi Reichik suggested that we should make a bezdin, and people should give days or months from their life as a matana to the Rebbe. These are things that was done when the Rebbe Rashab before Beis Nissen, he did that. And then afterwards, when the Frierdiker Rebbe took over in the sea, as the first year, the Frierdiker Rebbe got very sick, and his life was in danger. So they also made a bezdin, and people gave months, a month. I think the Rebbetzin said she's going to give. The Frierdiker Rebbe's mother, I think, said she wants to give it much more. And he said we can't take it. But then that was in the weekdays. They even wrote down how much each one is giving. So here, that's what they did here also. But then, just to go through what happened throughout the days of Simchas Torah, the Rebbe sent on a message, people should dance and be happy. And Simcha is the one that's going to affect and help him. And everyone remembers that they were singing the Nigen, and it switched within a short while from some words to another words. They sang, the Rebbe wird sein gesund, the Rebbe wird sein gesund. That went on for a while, and then automatically changed. No, first they sang, the Rebbe soll sein gesund, the Rebbe soll sein gesund. Then it changed, the Rebbe wird sein gesund. And then it changed, the Rebbe is gesund. But they made a minyan in front of inside the Rebbe's room, and it's all the messages that we got. So this was a very hard time, knowing that this is going on. The surprise was that Motzei Simchas Torah, the Rebbe spoke from his room on the hookup downstairs, and this was mamish badei, just 48 hours after the heart attack, such a massive heart attack. He spoke, and everybody tzchok mamish to hear the Rebbe speak. The doctors gave him a few minutes, and the Rebbe spoke much more. But and the next time was Motzei Shabbos Bereishis, the Rebbe spoke again, which was again a big chiddush. And then the Rebbe started speaking every Motzei Shabbos from his room. And then it changed that he came out to Fabring in Motzei Shabbos Fabringen. But so I'm just repeating it because it's good to remind yourself and you get the feeling that how it was then. And everyone felt that they have to do everything possible to help the Rebbe's gesund. This nakuda that it says in Tanya that Chaya Tzadik, Einem Chayim Psorim, the life of a Tzadik is not physical life, but Chayim Ruchniim, spiritual life, Amunah, Ave, Yireh. Then the feeling was very strong then, because everyone knew that it was that Rebbe's physical life is not his. His physical life is not his. It's the Chassidim. It's Klal Yisrael, which is similar to the word that the Rebbetzin said in the deposition for the Svarim. She said that when they asked her, who did the Svarim belong to your father or to the Chassidim? So she said that, everyone knows the Svar. She said that he himself belongs to Chassidim. So certainly the Svarim belongs to Chassidim. So the Rebbe belongs to Chassidim, so his whole mitzvah is, and therefore the Chassidim's behavior gives the Rebbe health, which even though now there is no Gashmistic health, that's Negeya, but it's still, the Nakuda is there. It gives the Rebbe Chayas, maybe now it's Chayas Ruchnin, that if we behave the way we're supposed to. I remember once somebody came over to the Rebbe Fabrengen, and I heard a person say to the Rebbe, don't remember which Fabrengen, and it was in the Sukkah, Fabrengen in the Sukkah, but maybe I don't remember that. Came over to the Rebbe, and he brought the Rebbe a bottle of mashke, and he said he's a shliach from Shazar to bring the Rebbe the bottle of mashke. And he said to the Rebbe that Shazar told him to say to the Rebbe, he's giving him, wishing the Rebbe will sein gesund. The Rebbe should be healthy. And the Rebbe answered him, you could also do something for my health. So you looked at the Rebbe and understand, well, what could he do? He's not a doctor. He's not, what could he do for the Rebbe's health? So the Rebbe said, and I can't say the words exactly, but the teichon was, if you're going to strengthen your Torah mitzvahs, that'll give me health. So it's not only that the Rebbe's life is ruchnias, and Mele, it's his ruchnias. The Rebbe and the Chassidim are one, but Mele, the life of, the ruchnisdike life of the Chassidim gives life to the Rebbe. Then it was mamish felt, everyone felt that it's negated to give the Rebbe health. He said, well, I remember those years, there was a person who went into Yechidus, and the Rebbe coughed a lot. Earlier years, the Rebbe used to cough. The later years, it wasn't. But mainly, I remember from the chofs, the Rebbe would cough a lot. So this guy tells the Rebbe in Yechidus, that's what they said over later. He was a pharmacist, that he has a very good medicine for coughing. And the Rebbe said, that's what the story they said, and I don't know, I can't vouch for it. The Rebbe said that as Chassidim, no, Chassidim, no, as Yidden, will tshuva ton, husten. That if Yidden will do tshuva, then I'm going to stop coughing. In other words, his coughing, which is something negative, depends on the matzav of the Yidden, the way they are. So that's what it is. Because since his life is Ruchnias, and his whole life is Chassidim, or Yidden Bechlal, like Moshe ben Yossi Ador, his life is the Yidden, so the Yidden's behavior give chayas. So the Chassidim is befrat, the Chassidim are the closest, but all Yidden. And this thing that the Ruchnistic life of Inyan of Chassidim gives the Rebbe chayas was felt in the time then. More than Rosh Chodesh Kislev, when was the part of the recovery, more when before that, when the problem was, when the Rebbe was not feeling well, that's when everyone felt that we have to do everything possible. Everyone took upon themselves, not privately, achlot is this knowing that my achlot, my behaving better, will give the Rebbe nachas and give the Rebbe health, and give the Rebbe gesund. So that's what we saw then, because the Rebbe's life, personal life, no matter how great, is still connected to Chassidim as much as it's interesting. There's a sikh which the Rebbe has in Chelik Lamed Gimel, Parshas Chukas. There it talks about the famous Rashi that the Rebbe mentioned many times. Rashi has Shaila. One place it says, "Vayishlach Moshe Malachim." Moshe sent messengers to Sichen, and another place it says, "Vayishlach Yisrael." The Yidden send. So Rashi says it's the same thing. Moshe, Yisrael, and Moshe and Yidden, and Malamed Nosi Ador, B'chol Ador. The Nosi Ador is like the whole generation. It's all like one. The Nosi Ador is his Metzias, is the Metzias of the generation. So the Rebbe is Medayek, interesting diuk. In Medrash, the same lotion is there. It's taken from Medrash. Rashi takes from Medrash, but Rashi, the Medrash doesn't say Nosi Ador Kechol Ador. It says Reish Hador Kechol Ador. Reish Hador means the head of the generation, which seemingly it's just a different expression. You could say the word Reish Hador, you could say Nosi Ador, but by the Rebbe, there's no such thing. That it's the same lotion, like a big deal. You can't make a fuss over it. But every little diuk in Torah is exact and has a deep meaning. The Rebbe says that what Rashi writes is much deeper than what it says in Medrash. That's why Rashi changed. Why did Rashi change Lashon from the Medrash? Because Rashi wants to say something deeper. The Lashon of the Medrash is Reish Ador Kechol Ador. The head. Yeah. The head, which means the leader, the head is Kechol Ador. Fine. The word Nosi comes from the word Nesius, the elevated. So you have in Yonim in the Rebbe, which he is beyond the people. Being that he's the leader, he has his own madreges, which is completely beyond, which we can't imagine. We have no connection to it. So one might think that only in the Yonim of the Rebbe, of the Nosi, of the Reish, that's negated to the Klal, that's where he's one with the Klal, like a head. The head controls the body. The head gives chayes to the body. So it's shaycha to the body. So all the Yidden are the body. The head is the head, and his connection, his mitzias, is for the sake of the Yidden. But it doesn't mean that there isn't things that the Rebbe has, which he's his own things. He's his own madregas, and his madregas, which is not tzilas, in the highest madregas that you have tzilas in the place. How far are we going to go? We're not giving any addresses, but his madrega is. So that could be his own personal thing. That's not shaychas to the door. Rashi says not like that. Rashi says Nosi Ador. And the word Nosi, that even als Nosi, which has the meaning also of elevated, even that is shaychas to everybody. It's an interesting thing. The madregas, which we have no understanding in the madregas or the Rebbe is. See, the madregas which shaychas to us, we could have some connection, some feeling. But there are certain things which is completely beyond that, and even that is also kechol ador, because his whole mitzias is that. It's the highest madregas that he has. And what are his highest madregas? We don't know. It's the famous word. I don't know who said it. Something told me once. The Rebbe said it. Someone say it's a Polish Rebbe said, but it's an interesting word. Someone asked him, are, so they asked him, are there still, it says in Gemara that there are Lamed Vov Tzadikim Nestorim in every generation. There's 36 hidden Tzadikim in every generation. So someone asked, I don't remember who, but someone said it was the Alter Rebbe, but I don't know if it's true. But whatever, it's about Samchas. Are there still Lamed Vov Tzadikim in our generation? Tzadikim Nestorim. So the one says it's a Tzemach Tzedek, that's a different word. And the Tzemach Tzedek said yes. Two of them come to Lubavitch, come to him. Okay, that's one word. But the other word is that this Rebbe, and if it's Val Rebbe, I don't know, they asked him if there's still Tzadikim Nestorim in our generation. So he said, yeah, and I'm one of them. So the guy asked him, you're not a Tzadik Nister. Everyone knows that you're a Tzadik. So I'm talking about Tzadikim Nestorim. So this is what he answered him. Ochum wei, will gewähnt zu mir, ich bin nur das, was ihr wisst wegen mir. Ochum wei would be to me if all I would be is what you know about me, what you know I am. That'd be ochum wei. In other words, he was saying that there is much higher madreges, which you guys have no idea. So mainly in that level is a tzaddik nister. So the Rebbe's madreges we don't know. And the Shai, what could be madreges that we don't know? We know in Tanya it says what a tzaddik is. So we have the famous story with the Shpoler Zayde. Shpoler Zayde was once by the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe showed him his manuscript that he wrote, a Sefer Shel Tzadikim. What does that mean? He wrote Tanya as a Sefer Shel Beinanim. Sefer describes what the level of a Beinani. In Sefer HaTanya, he also describes what a tzaddik is. What he describes, Beinani still has Yitzhara, tzaddik doesn't have Yitzhara, tzaddik table, tzaddik garalik. But he only describes there what a tzaddik is in comparison to a Beinani. But that's not really what a tzaddik is be'etzim. So the Alter Rebbe wrote a Sefer, which was a Sefer Shel Tzadikim. And he showed it to the Shpoler Zayde. Remember when the Rebbe told him from Ringen, and the Shpoler Zayde looked at it and he said, the world is not the roya for this. I think you should burn it. And he added, und ich will Eile sein belav hashamayim in them fire. And I'm going to go up to Shamayim in that fire. This is burned. I'll be going up. What happened later, there was a sefer by the Alter Rebbe, and this sefer got burned. That day, the Shpoler Zayde was nistalik. And the Rebbe finished off that the connection between the two, I don't know. I don't know the connection. But I want to say that there are things that by a tzaddik, which a tzaddik of Tanya is hard to us to grasp such a madrege. But that's even a tzaddik be'erech to a beinani. So that's the Rebbe's madreges. Nevertheless, the Rebbe says in that sich in Chelik Lamed Gimel that nosi ador kechol ador. The nosi, even als nosi, which means the elevated madreges he has, is not his. Which, by the way, there's a psashtikal stira, I think, in Chelik Dalet and Parshas Keira, the Rebbe writes also that everything of the Rebbe is connected to the door, to Chassidim, to the... But there the Rebbe, in the parenthesis, says that the Hinyonim betur nosi, that the Nisim, Rabbeim, whatever they have, als nosi, which whatever betur nosi, bepashtas means not what he has his own personal things. Whatever he is, als nosi from the people, is all part of connected to the people. But from this Sichas Mashman that he says clearly that it's not only that. Whatever the Rebbe has, it's all connected to us. So the bottom line, what's Negei Lamaisa? Just to know that Rebbe's Madreges, we don't have to know his Madreges. The word is that to know that whatever we do is Negei to him. Whatever we do is Negei to the Rebbe's health, to the Rebbe's, whatever now, it's not physical health, but it's our Aveda is Negei. So we have to, when it comes, we have to, think about our iskashres. We have to strengthen our iskashres and think. It's also important to think about the Rebbe, to not know his madreges, but push it to see what we could see, what the Rebbe does for us, and what the Rebbe did for us and continues doing for us, and Mamela that gives us iskashres. Also, there's another Nakuda here when it comes to the Shchidish Kislev, when we celebrate that the Rebbe, the Gashmias, his body was healthy and recovered. So it brings us to the feeling, the importance of seeing the Rebbe Begashmias. That's what it was. It was, everyone knew that Beruchnias is not Shaykhis anything, but the Gashmias. And that's what we don't see now. Because the Gashmias, the Rebbe is here, but the Gashmias, which is something that to us Gashmias people, that's what we need. And what it brings out, it brings Gaguya, means longing to the time when we were able to see the Rebbe Begashmias, able to go to the Rebbe Begashmias and see the Rebbe Begashmias. And that's what the Shchedish is supposed to make. And supposed at the same time bring out that we know that Afal Pikein, these Kashas is there, the Rebbe is with us. And you have to have both sides. It's not easy to have both feelings. They're two hofchim, they're two opposite feelings. But Yid is always used to two opposites. The Rebbe said that many times, because Yid is connected to the Eibishter, and the Eibishter is Neisa hofchim, the Eibishter is, there's no opposites by the Eibishter. So Yid also, like the Rebbe says, Amun and Bitochen are two opposites. We have to have a munah that whatever happens to a Yid is for the good. It's the best. The Eibishter only does good. So if someone is sick, chas v'sholem, he has to feel that the Eibishter is good. And at the same time, at the same moment, you have to be talking that the Eibishter will cure you. Why should he cure you if it's good? If it's good. Elamai, two opposites, but the Eibishter wants both. And the Rebbe asks, how could it be? Yes, a Yid could be neisahov like the Eibishter. So this also, a Yid could have the opposite, a feeling like this and feeling like that. It says like the Lashon Hazeh and Brought in Tanya, one side you cry and one side you're happy. They're both. But it brings back the feeling that you need the Rebbe with us begashmias. We need the Rebbe begashmias. And at the same time, to realize that we shouldn't, chas v'sholem, think he's not there. So we have to have both. And this is what Shchedish Kislev is negay. And this is the beginning of the month of Kislev. It means that this is a yesod in all the other things that happen in Kislev. Even though this, out of all the things of Kislev, this is the last thing that happened. This Kislev is the first, and then Nistes Kislev, Yud Kislev, and Yudalit Kislev, and this is the last. But as far as the dates, they should make it so that this is a date at the beginning. This is Kela the whole month, because this is a very important date that gives us chayas and everything else. What Kislev represents and Yudalit Kislev represents, this gives us chayas. So we have to think about it. And the Shabbos and Mevorchim Kislev is the date when we are supposed to take all this in our mind, to think about all this. And that comes through thinking back the matzah the way it was then, and understanding what the Rebbe gave us. And this is something that everyone could think, and this is a way to straighten our discussions. And to think about what the Rebbe is. I've covered this over many times, that the Rebbe said Toshis Beis that he got a invitation for a bar mitzvah. Someone wrote to the Rebbe about a bar mitzvah, and the guy wrote to the Rebbe that he's asking the Rebbe for a brocha, that his son, the bar mitzvah brocha, should not know from anything but from the Eibishter and Lubavitch. And the Rebbe continued explaining that Lubavitch and the Eibishter is one thing. Because what's Lubavitch? Lubavitch is to spread that there's nothing but the Eibishter, ain't Milvade. And the Rebbe pointed at the cake that was there on the table. He says, you see this is cake, you think? This is the Dvar Hashem that's behind it. That's what Lubavitch is, to do that. Now, we found out that the person, this was Toshim Yud Beis, before my time, when I said the Sikha, we know the person who wrote to the Rebbe didn't write exactly those words. He didn't write, should know from the Eibishter and Lubavitch. He wrote that he asked his son, should know from the Eibishter and the Rebbe. And the Rebbe touched to do is to Lubavitch. And what the Rebbe explained what Lubavitch is, who's Lubavitch? That's the Rebbe. So what is it? To be Megala Lukus in the world. His whole Metzias is Gilui Lukus. Gilui Lukus in us. So we know that comes to Shchedish Kislev, and it's a day that negates to the Rebbe personally. So it's good to think, what is the Rebbe? Again, we know what it is, but we have to know always when you have to think about it, like it says, Tzadikim Deimim Lebeiram. Tzadikim are like Deibishter. By Deibishter, we do the same thing. Everyone knows the greatness of God. Nevertheless, every day again we say, "Okay, like God, will give us one later." You talk Deibishter is so good. Right? We have to remind ourselves. We have to think about it. It's also about the Rebbe. So So there's two things. Think about the Mevorchim that the Rebbe did. Then you have the portion, the Rebbe's Metzias of which is Zachakal Gilei Lakus. Nothing else. And all the Gashmias of his body, to him it didn't mean much. You can see that the Rebbe's portion to Gashmias didn't mean much. He did things which in Derech HaTeva it's hard to understand how by Gashmias is possible, standing by the hours by Koshel Broch and the hours by dollars and by the ale. These are Gashmias things that a Yelud Isha, which means a normal human being, can do it. So, and that's who we are connected to. It reminds me of the word about the Yelud Isha, that the Magid, the Mezritcher Magid, said is Megid the Baal Shem Tov. It's a long story how the Magid became a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, the Chassid Baal Shem Tov Talmud. With the Pnei Yeshua, the story is a long story, but the I'm trying to say is that the Pnei Yeshua told him, his friend, the Magid was a friend of his, to go to the Baal Shem Tov. Yeshua himself didn't go, but he told the Magid to go. And the Magid said, how could I go? First of all, it's a waste of time, little Torah. But besides that, I have, the way the Lashon is, tak kashas, tofku, 500 kashas on the Baal Shem Tov, what I heard about him. How could I go to him? Anyway, the end was he convinced him, and the Magid went to the Baal Shem Tov. And also the Chatchili didn't see anything. Anyway, the bottom line, he became the Baal Shem Tov's top Talmud. He became the Malamakit. When he came back to the Pnei Yeshua, the next time he told him about the Baal Shem Tov, you can't imagine the greatest things. About the Pnei Yeshua said to him, and what happened to your 500 kashas? It's 500 kashas on the Baal Shem Tov. What happened to those kashas? So he said like this, a person that if I would not hear from himself that he is a human being, he called him a Yelud Isha born from a mother, I wouldn't believe it. I would think he's a Malach. The only reason I know that he's not a Malach because he told me. On a person like that, you could ask kashas. In other words, Be'etzim, not the Yelud Isha. He's Nagashmas Dikaguf, but his Madrege and the way he is not the same Madrege. There are certain things that you, as a normal Yelud Isha, is. And these are things that we see. We're not talking about things that we don't see, that's behind the scenes. Anyway, so it comes to the Kislev, we have to think about it. The Rebbe, that it's us, because the Rebbe and Chassidim are one. So the Rebbe's connection to us is complete, and what we do is negate to the Rebbe. And we have to strengthen our skashas on a day like this. So let's say L'chaim, as I said before, Kislev Shluchim has a Fabrengen now, so people want to go on. So we'll finish with this. So L'chaim, we should think about it and take it to heart, take it seriously. And I'm saying what the Indian is not saying to anybody, I'm saying to myself. And we should do what the Rebbe wants and give the Rebbe nachas. And very, very soon we will see the Rebbe again, the Guv Gashmi, which will be like a celebration of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Rosh Chodesh Kislev is when we got the Rebbe, the Guv Gashmi. His life was in danger. His Gashmistic life was in danger. His Ruchnistic life wasn't in danger, but his Gashmistic life was in danger. And we had him. Mashiach will come. This will be back. It'll be the big Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And it should happen very, very soon. L'chaim, l'chaim. Maybe someone wants to say something. Because he said, I think, don't want to take away from others. So maybe someone wants to add something. Rabbi Frankfurter, do you want to add something or something? Maybe someone else wants to say something. I was just listening a minute ago before we started. I don't know, it's somewhere going around. The video of the Rebbe making with his hands to the Nigun of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Let's see which one it is. I don't even know which one it is, which thing it is. I don't know if I'll find it. I don't see it. Okay, because I was thinking that we should hear it anyway. Whatever it is, no. Okay. A good Woche, a good Chodesh. We should straighten these kashrus. That's the bottom line. Right, alle gesund. Unless someone else still wants to say something.